Hi, hello, welcome back. My name is Devaraj and we're back today talking about bioenergetics. And today, in fact, we're going to look at Reichian character structures, Reichian characterology, character structure, character formation, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to be looking at one particular character, the oral character. But before I get cracking with the oral and explain why it's a very interesting character structure to look at and the significance it has for many of us, I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes about Reichian characterology in general. Reichian, the word comes from Wilhelm Reich, an Austrian psychoanalyst, inventor and all-round free thinker who wrote a book which was published in 1933 called Character Structure or Character Analysis, let's get this right. And this was quite a radical book at the time, and it probably could have had a great deal more impact, but it actually ended up doing for various reasons I'll look at briefly. But it was pretty radical in that in this book he isolated 5 basic types of body type and gave them names as characters which pointed to their basic orientation in life, how they were as personalities. And in so doing he became really the first man to really kind of solidly attempt to actually really tie together the personality with the body shape, with holding, armoring as he called it, and of course with the unconscious mind, the basic notion that there's a repository of repressed desires and instincts in the human body. So, Reich's book, Character Analysis, was a huge book potentially, and it was very famous for a while. The Second World War kind of messed things up, and then he kind of fell a bit into disrepute in the States. You can read up the history if you want to. But nevertheless, Character Analysis was probably his greatest work. And in it, he essentially allocated 5 different basic stereotypes of how we can develop. And he gave these stereotypes quite radical names, really, useful names in psychiatric terms, but also names that in today's society, or certainly the society that emerged from the 60s and 70s onwards, were really kind of too in your face, so to speak, to get mainstream acceptance, in my opinion. Those 5 characters were the oral, the rigid, the masochist, the schizophrenic, and psychopath. And as you can imagine, people, even today people are interested in this, and some softening of the terms has gone on, but nevertheless, it somewhere didn't really help in the society that he gave them these terms, even though they were psychiatrically useful and accurate. So, in many ways, Reichian characterology has fallen out of favour and is not so well known or so popular, but it still has a lot of useful stuff in it. And that's why I wanted to make this brief series. And today we're going to be looking at the oral character. I picked the oral character because he's probably the least controversial of the 5. It's pretty well accepted that there is a kind of oral phase, so to speak, drawn from Freudian psychology, 120 years ago. And the oral traits, actually I'm going to go one step back before we get into it. These five characters, what's really useful to know, of course, when people learn about Reichian characterology, the first question is which one am I? Which one am I? Am I a psychopath, oral, rigid, masochist, schizophrenic? Which one am I? And this, for most people, isn't such a useful question. It's useful in a way, but in my experience of working with people, it's quite rare that you find someone that fits completely into one category. What I see tends to happen is that we develop over time, and by time I mean the early years of our life, the first 5 to 10 years, we get influences in all of these different things, and some are more dominant. You will occasionally meet someone who is totally oral. You will occasionally meet someone who is pure psychopath. You will meet someone who is really schizoid, basically, or just total rigid. But generally what I see happening, particularly in today's society, is that people have a mixture of these character types within them, and it may be that they are layered on top of each other in a certain way. And also, just to mention before we get into oral, of course the point of it all is how do you treat these conditions. We'll be looking also, in fact I'll do a lot more work on this in bioenergetics, the journey as we go on how to actually remove these character structures from our body armor, or rather our body, basically our muscle system, essentially our muscle system. We'll do a little, talk a little bit about it here, but if you're interested in that kind of work, then check out Bioenergetics for Journey, the online 52-week intensive. Okay, I think I've said enough what I need to say, because I don't want people going totally down the road, oh, I'm this character, when it may be that there's quite a variety of stuff in there. But let's take a look at the oral character. And like I said, this is, it's kind of clear cut. Some of the others were a bit controversial, and there was different psychoanalysts saying this and this, but the oral is pretty clear cut. And the underlying thing that defines psychologically the oral trait is historically some form usually of withdrawal or abandonment wound in very early childhood during the oral phase, which is generally taken from birth up to about 15-18 months at the outside. There is some withdrawal of what was needed for the child, and generally that means some form of mother wound, basically, that the mother was not present, maybe she left the child, or was not really emotionally available, or just did not give the child completely what it needed, did not give the child enough of what it needed. I mean, to be honest, of course, pretty much anyone brought up will not have the perfect mother. We don't live in a perfect society. But generally there's quite a strong withdrawal wound in early childhood with oral people. And this leaves inside the psyche of the oral person the underlying feeling that they don't have enough, that they never really got given enough in early childhood. That's the basic feeling. There was never really enough around. And what tends to happen is that they then believe that it's the responsibility of the outside world, society, friends, partners later on, to give to them. It's their responsibility to give, but it's not so much their responsibility to reach out in any way. And indeed, as we'll see, the action of reaching out can actually stir up a lot of feelings for oral people, but that they are kind of owed by society, and this is how they tend to go through life. Something very interesting for men in particular who are into men's work. You may be familiar with, what's the name of the book by Robert Glover, No More Mr. Nice Guy. No More Mr. Nice Guy. Very famous book, I think, from the 90s. And of course, a lot of nice guys will have strong level of oral traits. They tend to find it difficult to get angry. They tend to withdraw a bit. When they do get angry, it's a little burst of it, and then it's all kind of gone. There tends to be a bit feelings of inner emptiness that haunt them quite a lot. Let's look at the posture, because the posture is very interesting, and it was, the posture was such a big thing in characterology, because in character formation, character structures, character analysis, whatever you want to call it, because the posture kind of shows you almost the psychology, basically. So let's try and do, I have to turn my camera down a little bit and try and do the classic kind of oral posture. That maybe someone is pure, or it's easier to see it from the side. The knees tend to be quite locked with the legs very straight. The belly kind of pushes out a bit, but the chest withdraws and the head sticks forward. The arms are back a bit. It's this kind of feeling like, give me something. It's almost like, just please give me something. Please give me something. It's like that. The head pushing forwards, the belly out a little bit, and the knees quite locked. This is the kind of feeling. This, if I see it from, I can show you from front on a little bit. See if you can see it. The belly's kind of pushing out, but the chest is back and the head is craning forwards. The arms are kind of back, like redundant, not really useful. And it's this, it's there. If you give it a try, get in this posture, and you'll probably feel it, this feeling like, I just need someone to give me something. It's a feeling of just severe malnourishment. The arms and shoulders are kind of cut off from. And so this kind of oral character goes through life basically believing that the outside needs to give. They always have this kind of sensation. They always seem like they just need to be given to a lot. They need to get a lot of nourishment somewhere. They can't easily reach out or get nourishment for themselves. And in their own belief system, generally, it's like, hey, I should be given to. And this was because of the withdrawal of love early in childhood, very early in infancy, basically. We're looking the first 12, 15, maybe 18 months at the outside. So this is essentially the oral character. And as they go through life and they get older, if they get a job, often they struggle in work. The feeling is they're not very happy at work, they always want to leave quite often, and they basically believe that the organisation should give to them, should give to them. You know, it's not that they give to society and they get something back, they are owed, it's the basic feeling. When they get into relationships, you know, when they don't find lovers, it's often the same. It's often the same, you know, they want to be given to a lot. And it's kind of like the anxious personality in attachment theory, if you know that one. Likewise in friendships, you know, they need a lot. They need a lot. And they may learn manipulative techniques to sucker people in. You know, some people who perhaps feel a bit guilty underneath can get tied up with orals, and the oral will always be pulling them in some way. You know, you don't really give it to me, you know, this kind of, you don't really give it to me, you know, and then the person that feels guilty feels like, oh wow, I've got to really, you know, I really want to give it to you, I really want to give it to you, you know. Like I say, there's also other tendencies. There can be tendencies in the oral character towards depression, and often they need to be given quite a lot at a mental level as well. They don't really need that in terms of their deeper being, but they tend to go out after that. They want to big themselves up a lot in other people's company and boost their self-esteem and their self-image. When our self-image feels high, we get a sort of hit of energy and we feel good about ourselves. But it's not very reliable in the long term, and people who need that all the time to keep feeling good about themselves, when they don't get it, or they get a knockback and someone tells them like strong feedback or something bad happens, then they can kind of collapse, and they don't have any center, much energy in their belly or in their body generally to enable them to bounce back or come back, and so they can stay in depression and a kind of submerged state in themselves for very long periods of time. So, you know, that what I'm basically saying is underlying narcissism often there with the oral characters. So, okay, we've discussed the oral character quite extensively, I think, and looked at the posture and some of the, you know, the kind of woundings that go on in early childhood that would lead to the oral character. And maybe you see bits of this in yourself or whatever. You know, I certainly see bits of it in me. You know, bits of it in me. I was not brought up by my original parents. They left me and I was adopted. And I certainly can get pretty oral in terms of believing people should just give to me. You know, people should just give to me. You know, I remember in my own adolescence often feeling like, you know, certain state institutions should just give it to us. They should just be there. Someone should pay for them and they should just give it to us. You know, when I see today, you know, like in the UK, the NHS, you know, which is always under fire and collapsing, and the National Health Service, basically, if you're not a Brit, you know, a lot of people believe it should just be state funded and everyone should just be, you know, looked after, you know, and that is a kind of oral stereotype. Of course, it is great to have a safety net and a health system, in my opinion, but nevertheless, there is a huge level of oral stuff going on with that as well. So having talked about these different psychological and physical aspects of the oral, let's look a little bit what can be done about this. Like I say, if you are really interested, you should get involved with Bioenergetics for Journey, where we will do workouts that work with all of these character structures to start to remove them from the muscle system and thus the psyche, or at least take some levels out, because that tends to be how it is in reality. You know, if you have oral traits, you know, they will be on multiple levels, and if you can get some of the big levels out, the kind of surface layers of it, you become much more functional in relationships. And there will still be deeper layers, that's how it is, but your life gets much, much better. So something we've noticed about the oral character when I'm talking about it is, I'm just stepping back, the knees tend to be locked a lot. So, you know, working with the legs is very, very useful with the oral character. Getting the legs bent, the knees bent, and doing leg exercises, lying on your back, stretching your legs, this kind of thing is very, very useful to get some of the holding out of the leg areas. And then also working with the belly is very, very useful. Trying to get some feeling in the belly can give the oral character some more separation from this kind of narcissistic world in their mind, where they're constantly believing that people owe them, you know, and this inevitably takes them out of their body, and it's not a useful program to run. That can really help. In addition, working with anger is very, very useful. Working with anger is very, very useful. Often oral people find it difficult to get angry, or if they can get angry, it's like a sort of hissy fit for 5-10 seconds and then it's gone. And when an oral person can get sustainably angry, and by angry I really mean shouting angry, you know, putting it out really loud and from deep inside the body, you know, a lot will start to move quite quickly in the oral character structure. So those are some ways that you can work with your oral character with a therapist or a little bit on your own. Like I say, if you're interested in this work, then check out Bioenergetics, The Journey. We will be getting to oral characters in the second half of that 1-year course, and to other character structures as well. Okay, I think that's about it. Is there anything I've missed? I've got a little list of things to talk about down here, but I think I've covered it all. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and feel free to get in touch, leave a comment, or hit me up for a one-to-one session. We can talk more. Okay, speak to you soon, and bye for now.